Throughout the Thomas and Friends series, there have been plenty of episode types. There have been simple stories, happy stories, sweet stories, sad stories, action-packed stories, and even spooky stories. With Halloween coming up in just a few days, I'd like to take a look at these spooky episodes. Specifically, what makes them work and what doesn't. So, what makes one of these stories work, let alone in a children's show? Well, for Thomas, it's pretty easy. The show itself is already slightly more mature than most other kids' shows, so it's easier to get away with more. So what is this more that the crew got away with? What did they do? The best Spooky Thomas stories come from the 5th series. There are 4 that come to the top of my head when I think of the spooky episodes. I want to go over 2 of these. One of them, Haunted Henry, has to do with setting. Most of this episode takes place in this unknown, foggy countryside. There's very little light in these scenes. There's Henry's lamps, the red signal, the amber lamp, and the station light. Considering the station here is known to be abandoned, someone or something being in there, let alone with a light shining through the windows, is a terrifying image. The second time Henry crosses the area, though, is the truly scary part. Not only is everything the same, but as Henry goes by, we see a mysterious figure watching. Of course, it turns out to be a fogman, but we don't know that until the very end. It all takes part in making a spooky setting. The frightening images finally come to a stop after the very intense crash, where we see the trucks possibly die. Totally gruesome. If you want another episode that works with scary setting, you should also watch Toby's Discovery. The next theme I want to go over is the sense of uncertainty. I would talk about Duncan Gets Spooked here, but the Unlucky Tug has already made a whole video on that episode. So in this video, I'm going to talk about Stepney Gets Lost. In this episode, after working with Toby and Mavis at the quarry, he gets lost in the fog. Just when Stepney thinks he's on his way home, we see a red light appear in front of his face. There's a small moment of not knowing where Stepney is until...
Oh no! We're in the scrapyards!
And just when you think you know exactly what's happening now, 2 diesels roll up next to Stepney. Of course, we know who they are now, but this was their first, and likely only planned, appearance. We know nothing about these guys, besides they probably work at the yards, and one of their names is Bert. When Stepney is shunted under the big grabber, everything seems hopeless. It's uncertain how Stepney could even possibly escape.
This engine's not for scrapping!
This may honestly be one of the scariest scenes in the show, just for how uncertain it makes the audience feel until the end. These aspects were a huge piece of making Thomas's spooky episodes really scary. Now, how did that translate to the CGI series? Just like the model episodes, I want to go over one that tries to make a spooky setting. I think the one that tried the most was Flatbeds of Fear. Throughout the entire episode, there's a huge fog everywhere, and in the perfect world, that would be spooky. There are 2 big problems in this episode though. Let's compare it to Haunted Henry, shall we? The first huge difference here is the time. In Haunted Henry, it's mostly nighttime, which makes for a creepier feeling from the dark. In Flatbeds of Fear, it's all during the day, so the fog has almost no effect. The second big difference is, in Haunted Henry, the fog is very low. You can see around Henry, but not below him. You can't see the ground, which is all that's needed for Henry to not see where he's going. In Flatbeds of Fear, they way overdo the fog, and it's to the point that it just looks stupid. There's a lot more I can say about this episode, but that's for another video. The other episode I want to look at is the Phantom Express. This one has so many problems. To start off the episode, James is telling Percy about the Phantom Express, a ghost train that we end up knowing nothing about. Like, nothing. I'd still be okay if the episode didn't have this next problem. Throughout the episode, we see Percy and Steven get scared by ghostly elements, but before each of these events, we see it's just James playing tricks. I think it would have been better if maybe, let's say Percy and James had to deliver something to Ulfstead together, and James sort of disappears when they get to the castle. maybe James would have told the story as they were on the way to the castle. Not only does this not show James pulling off all the pranks from his perspective, but it'd give another reason for Percy and Stephen to be frightened. You know, give the characters and audience some sense of uncertainty. That's just the way I see it, though. I really feel like the CGI series misunderstood what actually made a story scary. It's either that, or the team just wasn't allowed to make real scary stories. That would make sense, as kids shows have been dumbed down so much these days. Either way, if you're looking for a scary Thomas episode, go look for a model series episode, because there aren't any true spooks in the CGI series. I guess Thomas just isn't really scary anymore. Hello?